The arrival. The void of space around Sol had been peaceful for centuries. Then, in a single moment that would reshape galactic politics forever, 15,000 ships materialized from hyperspace jumps at the system's edge. They appeared in perfect formation, their obsidian hulls gleaming like dark mirrors against the starfield. Each vessel stretched kilometers in length, bristling with weapon arrays that could glass entire continents. At the center of this armada floated the flagship Dominion's Edge, a behemoth that dwarfed even the largest human stations. On its command bridge, Supreme Commander Velthak stood motionless, his 8-foot frame draped in ceremonial armor that had witnessed the conquest of 200 worlds. His species, the Nexari, had evolved on a harsh world where only the strongest survived. Their gray-green skin was tough as leather, their forearms perfectly adapted for both combat and complex manipulation tasks, and their large, multifaceted eyes could process tactical information at superhuman speeds. Behind Velthak, his bridge crew worked with mechanical precision. They had performed this ritual of conquest so many times it had become routine. The Nexari Confederation had built the largest empire in galactic history through a simple formula: overwhelming force, followed by immediate surrender demands, followed by either submission or annihilation. In 3 centuries of expansion, no species had ever chosen annihilation. The mathematics of survival were too clear. "Fleet status report," Velthak commanded, his voice carrying the authority of absolute power. "All 15,000 vessels in position, Supreme Commander," replied his tactical officer, a lean Nexari named Korthan. "Weapon systems charged, shields at maximum. We are ready to commence standard subjugation protocol." Velthak nodded slowly. Through the bridge's massive viewport he could see the third planet from this system's star. Earth hung like a blue-green jewel, unaware that its fate would be decided in the next few hours. The planet looked peaceful, almost primitive. Long-range scans had detected a scattered collection of space stations, perhaps 300 vessels of various sizes, and a single planetary defense grid that appeared laughably inadequate. "Intelligence assessment of local military capabilities?" Velthak asked. Commander Yazara, his intelligence chief, consulted her holographic displays. "Minimal threat level, Supreme Commander. Approximately 312 vessels detected, ranging from cargo haulers to what appear to be military escorts. No dreadnoughts, no planet killers, no significant defensive installations beyond basic orbital platforms. Their technology appears to be roughly equivalent to early spacefaring civilizations we conquered in the Andromeda sectors." Population centers? 12 billion inhabitants concentrated primarily on the third planet, with smaller colonies throughout the system. Standard carbon-based life forms, no exotic biology detected. They call themselves humans. Velthak allowed himself a thin smile. Humans. Another species that would learn the price of existing in Nexari space. He had no particular animosity toward them. Conquest was simply business. The Confederation needed resources, territory, and workers. These humans would provide all 3, assuming they chose to survive the encounter. "Open communications to the third planet," he ordered. The communication array hummed to life, broadcasting on all frequencies toward Earth. Velthak had delivered this speech so many times he could recite it in his sleep, but he never allowed his tone to become casual. Fear was a weapon, and weapons required maintenance. "Inhabitants of the third planet," his voice boomed across space, transmitted simultaneously in dozens of languages by the ship's translation matrix. "I am Supreme Commander Velthak of the Nexari Confederation. Your system now belongs to us. You have precisely 72 standard hours to surrender unconditionally." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle. Somewhere on that blue world, billions of humans were hearing this message, presumably beginning to panic, to weep, to rage against the unfairness of the universe. "Your military forces will stand down immediately. Your governments will transfer all authority to Confederation administrators. Your industrial capacity will be cataloged and repurposed for Confederation needs. Those who comply will be permitted to continue existing as productive members of our empire. Those who resist will be eliminated." Another pause. On most worlds, emergency broadcasts would already be scrambling across communication networks. Governments would be convening crisis sessions. Military leaders would be calculating impossible odds. You have seen our fleet. 15,000 warships capable of reducing your world to molten slag within hours. We have conquered 200 star systems using these same vessels. We have never been defeated, never been denied, never found a species foolish enough to choose death over service. You have 72 hours to avoid becoming the first. The transmission ended. Now came the waiting period, the time when conquered species typically progressed through the stages of defeat: denial, anger, bargaining, despair, and finally acceptance. Velthak had observed this pattern countless times. Some species reached acceptance within hours. Others required the full 3 days, but they all reached it eventually. "Sir," Corthan announced, "we're receiving a response from the planet." "Already?" Hawk was surprised. Most species needed at least several hours to formulate a response, usually a desperate plea for negotiation or more time. But these humans had replied within minutes. "Put it through." The main view screen flickered to life, displaying a human female in what appeared to be a military uniform. She looked to be middle-aged by human standards, with graying hair and calm, intelligent eyes. Most importantly, she showed no signs of fear, panic, or desperation. She looked like someone receiving a routine status report. "Supreme Commander Velthak," she said in a steady voice, "I'm Admiral Elizabeth Morrison, Director of Solar Defense Command. Thank you for the clear communication. We've received your message and are reviewing it with our leadership. We'll be in touch shortly." The transmission ended. Velthak stared at the blank screen in confusion. That was it? No pleading, no threats, no desperate attempts at negotiation? Just a polite acknowledgement and a promise to be in touch? "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're intercepting human transmissions across their global network." "Put them on speakers." The bridge filled with human voices, dozens of conversations happening simultaneously across their planet's communication grid. But instead of panic and despair, Velthak heard something else entirely. Fascinating ship design, clearly built for intimidation rather than efficiency. The geometric patterns suggest a hierarchical command structure similar to the Carthani Empire models we studied. Energy signatures are consistent with plasma-based weapon systems, probably 40 to 50 years behind our current defensive capabilities. Anyone else notice their formation flying? Classic dominance display behavior, very rigid, very predictable. Velthak listened in growing disbelief. These humans were analyzing his fleet. They were discussing his ship's capabilities, his tactical formations, his species' behavioral patterns, all in the calm, professional tones of academics reviewing research data. "Commander Izara," he said slowly, "are we certain our threat assessment was accurate?" His intelligence chief looked uncertain for the first time in years. "Sir, our long-range scans were thorough. Their technology should be no match for ours." "Then why aren't they afraid?" Before Izara could answer, new data began flowing across the tactical displays. Human vessels throughout the system were moving, but not in retreat or defensive formations. Instead, they seemed to be positioning themselves for better observation angles. Sophisticated sensor arrays were deploying throughout the outer system, all of them focused on the Nexari fleet. "Sir," Corthan reported, "the humans are scanning us. Deep-range analysis, full-spectrum electromagnetic surveys, even what appears to be behavioral observation equipment." "They're studying us?" "Yes, sir. Like we're some kind of scientific curiosity." On Earth, the human response was unlike anything in Velthak's experience. Instead of emergency sessions and military preparations, he observed what appeared to be academic conferences. Universities were holding seminars about Nexari culture and technology. News broadcasters discussed the arrival with the same tone they might use for a visiting delegation or an interesting astronomical phenomenon. More disturbing still were the intercepted military communications. Human officers discussed the Nexari threat assessment with professional detachment, analyzing weapon capabilities, ship specifications, and tactical doctrines. Their conclusion was consistent across all channels. The Nexari fleet posed no significant threat to Earth's defense. Systems. Sir, Izara said quietly, I'm detecting unusual energy signatures from the inner system. What kind of signatures? Unknown, sir. The technology is beyond our current understanding, but it appears to be some kind of defensive grid. It's been there all along. We just couldn't detect it until now because it wasn't active. Velthak felt a chill of uncertainty. Are you saying they have defensive systems we can't identify? Sir, I think they have defensive systems we can't even comprehend. As the first day passed, the human response became even more puzzling. Commercial traffic continued normally throughout their system. Stock markets remained stable. Children went to school. The only change was an increase in scientific research funding and a surge of interest in xenobiology programs. The humans had done something no species had ever done before. They had looked at the most powerful military force in galactic history and found it interesting rather than terrifying. They were treating the Confederation's Grand Fleet not as an existential threat, but as an opportunity to learn something new. For the first time in his long career of conquest, Supreme Commander Velthak began to suspect that the Nexari Confederation had finally encountered something larger than itself, something that wasn't afraid of them because it didn't need to be afraid of them, something that was studying them instead of surrendering to them. As the first day of his ultimatum passed, Velthak stared out at the blue world that should have been begging for mercy, but instead seemed to be taking notes. The thought that kept him awake through the long hours of space night was simple and terrifying. What if the humans knew something the Confederation didn't? The understanding. By the second day of the ultimatum, Supreme Commander Velthak's confidence had transformed into something approaching dread. His intelligence officers presented him with a briefing that challenged everything he thought he knew about conquest and power dynamics. Sir, Commander Izara began, her four hands trembling slightly as she accessed the data files. Our analysis of human behavior has revealed several concerning patterns. They're not just studying us, they're treating our arrival as a research opportunity. The main view screen displayed intercepted human communications from their global academic network. Professor Michael Chen from the Kepler Institute was presenting his preliminary findings to a packed virtual auditorium. The Nexari Confederation represents a fascinating example of expansion through intimidation, a strategy that worked well in the galactic power vacuum of the past 3 centuries, Chen explained to his audience. However, their tactical approach shows significant limitations when encountering more advanced civilizations. Note the primitive formation flying, the reliance on raw numbers rather than technological superiority, and most importantly, the psychological dependency on fear-based compliance. Velthak's mandibles clicked with frustration. They're lecturing about us like we're some historical curiosity. It gets worse, sir, Izara continued. Dr. Sarah Kim from the Fleet Architecture Department published a detailed analysis of our ship designs. She's identified 17 critical vulnerabilities in our hull configurations and propulsion systems. The display switched to a technical schematic that made Velthak's blood run cold. The human scientist had somehow penetrated their classified design specifications and created a comprehensive blueprint of Nexari weaknesses. Worse, she had shared this information freely across SAUs, their entire network. Sir, Corthan interrupted from his tactical station, we're detecting massive data compilation activities across the human colonies. They're building a complete psychological and tactical profile of our entire species. Show me. The view screen filled with human research data. Behavioral analysts had identified patterns in Nexari communication that revealed command structures, decision-making processes, and even individual personality profiles of bridge officers. Cultural anthropologists had mapped Confederation expansion patterns and predicted their next likely targets. Military strategists had calculated optimal defensive responses to every weapon system in the Nexari arsenal. But most unsettling of all were the economic analyses. Human economists had studied Confederation resource allocation, trade routes, and supply chains. Their conclusion was devastating. The Nexari Empire was overextended, resource-depleted, and economically unsustainable. The massive fleet surrounding Earth represented nearly 40% of their total military capacity, stretched across supply lines that were already failing. "They know we're weak," Velthak whispered. "Sir," his communications officer announced. "Incoming transmission from Earth. It's from their Admiral Morrison." The view screen activated, showing the same calm human military leader from the day before. But this time, she wasn't alone. Behind her stood representatives from various human institutions, scientists, economists, cultural specialists, and military analysts. "Supreme Commander Velthak," Morrison began, "thank you for your patience while we reviewed your proposal. We've completed our initial assessment and would like to discuss some alternative arrangements." Velthak found his voice. "Alternative arrangements? You will surrender unconditionally or face annihilation?" Morrison's expression didn't change. "With respect, Commander, that's not really an option for either of us. Our analysis indicates that any attempt to attack Earth would result in the complete destruction of your fleet within approximately 14 minutes. More importantly, such an action would destabilize the entire galactic region and ultimately harm both our civilizations." "Impossible. You have 300 ships. We have 15,000. Dr. Chen stepped forward. "Commander, may I suggest that you reconsider your intelligence data? Our 300 ships are decoy signals designed to maintain appearances. Our actual defensive capabilities are somewhat more comprehensive." The view screen split, showing a new tactical display. Suddenly, the space around Earth lit up with energy signatures that hadn't been visible before. Thousands of defensive platforms materialized from stealth fields. Weapon systems of incomprehensible design powered up throughout the solar system. Most shocking of all, the human cargo vessels shed their disguises, revealing themselves as warships that made Nexari dreadnoughts look like shuttlecraft. "We've been monitoring galactic affairs for quite some time," Morrison continued. "Your Confederation's expansion brought you to our attention about 50 years ago. We've been preparing for this meeting ever since." Velthak's tactical officers were frantically analyzing the new sensor data. Corthan's report confirmed his worst fears. "Sir, their ships are using technology we can't even classify. Energy weapons that manipulate matter at the quantum level, defensive shields that bend space-time, propulsion systems that appear to violate known physics. A single one of their actual warships could destroy our entire fleet." "Then why haven't they?" Velthak demanded. Dr. Kim answered from the transmission. "Because we're not conquerors, Commander. We're explorers, scientists, builders. We have no interest in destroying your empire or your people. What we're interested in is cooperation." The word hit Velthak like a physical blow. Cooperation. In 3 centuries of conquest, no species had ever offered cooperation to the Confederation. They had offered surrender, tribute, bargaining chips for mercy, but never cooperation between equals. "Your empire is failing," Dr. Chen explained with clinical precision. "Overextension, resource depletion, economic collapse. Your expansion model worked as long as you encountered primitive civilizations, but you've reached the limits of sustainable growth. Within 20 years, possibly 15, the Confederation will collapse under its own weight." "However," Morrison added, "we believe there's a better path forward. Humanity has developed technologies that could revolutionize galactic civilization. Medical advances that could extend lifespans across all species. Agricultural techniques that could feed populations on worlds you've written off as barren. Energy systems that could power entire star systems without depleting natural resources." Velthak stared at the humans in disbelief. "You're offering to help us?" "We're offering to help everyone," Morrison replied. "The galaxy is full of species that have been conquered, exploited, or destroyed by various empires throughout history. We believe it's time for a different approach. Not conquest, not empire, but genuine cooperation between equals. The implications were staggering. Everything Velthak had believed about power, about strength, about the natural order of the universe was being challenged by these strange humans who responded to threats with curiosity and offered help to their would-be conquerors. "Sir," Izara reported quietly, "I'm receiving data from our deep space monitoring stations. The humans aren't lying about our economic situation. Resource allocation has been declining for the past decade. Colonial tax revenues are down 30%. Military maintenance costs are exceeding budget projections by significant margins." Velthak realized that his grand fleet, his symbol of ultimate power, was actually proof of the Confederation's weakness. They had been forced to commit nearly half their military to this single system because they could no longer afford smaller, more efficient operations. They were gambling everything on one massive show of force, hoping to acquire the resources they desperately needed to continue existing. But the humans had seen through the facade immediately. They had recognized the fleet not as strength, but as desperation. "What exactly are you proposing?" Velthak asked. Morrison smiled for the first time since the conversations began. "A new model for galactic civilization. The Confederation becomes a partner in a larger alliance dedicated to mutual prosperity rather than conquest. Your military expertise, combined with our technological capabilities and the resources of other willing species, could create something unprecedented, a truly cooperative galactic community. And if we refuse? Then you return to your territory and continue your current path until economic collapse destroys your empire within 2 decades, Chen said matter-of-factly. "We won't stop you, but we also won't be able to help you." For long minutes, Velthak said nothing. Around him, his bridge crew waited in silence. 3 centuries of Nexari tradition demanded that he reject this offer, that he attack these humans and take their world by force. But 3 centuries of tactical training told him that such an attack would be suicide. More than that, these humans offered something the Confederation had never encountered: hope. Not the desperate hope of the conquered, but the genuine possibility of a better future for all species. "I need to consult with the Confederation Council," Velthak finally said. "Of course," Morrison replied. "Take all the time you need. We'll be here when you're ready to talk." The transmission ended, leaving Velthak alone with his thoughts and the most important decision in Nexari history. Outside the bridge viewports, Earth continued its peaceful rotation, its cities glowing with the light of a civilization that had looked at the galaxy's most feared military force and offered friendship instead of surrender. 6 hours later, Supreme Commander Velthak opened communications to Earth once more. This time, his message was simple. "Admiral Morrison, the Nexari Confederation would like to discuss the terms of your proposed alliance. The age of galactic conquest was over, the age of cooperation had begun, and it had started with humans who were too curious to be afraid and too wise to respond to threats with threats." In the years that followed, historians would mark this moment as the turning point in galactic civilization, when the most powerful empire in known space learned that true strength lay not in the ability to destroy, but in the wisdom to build something better together.